Okay, so I wanted to talk to you about some different types of paper and junk mail that you can use in your journals. So I found different things in my stash that I could show as examples of things that you could use. So to start out with, this is a sheet of stickers, dimensional stickers that I found at the dollar store. I've had these in my stash for quite a while now. They already look kind of old. They look sort of like older lace doilies, but you could embellish those with ink or paint. And then I also ripped this out of an old book that is actually about the 1800s. So if any of the text sticks out, you can pass it off as something vintage. And then it had this really neat print in it that you could cut out. It's got an announcement about Niagara Falls, and it already has those really cool little inked edges. So make sure to check out your library for older books like that have neat images and things. This is a piece of mail, just a flyer that you get in the mail. I'll show you what you can do with that. Here's a couple of sheets just torn out of a book, and they have edges that definitely look older. You wouldn't have to do anything at all to these pages. Here's some craft scrapbook paper that has a print on one side, and as you can see in here, I put a little corner pocket in there and stuck a little ATC card in there. This I think of as sort of a boo-boo page, a page that I had done some things on and it didn't come out quite well, but what you could do is tear part of the paper away and give it a torn look, ink the edges. You could cut out the stamps and make those into pockets, little tuck spots. So it has a lot of the neat coloring too from being dyed. And this is just a cereal box that I had cut part of it out as to make a cover. So this could be die cut. You could turn this into a tuck spot as well. You can trace some type of a pattern on it or a design, cut it out, and stamp on it, emboss it. This piece should look familiar from the last video. I did show you some of the paper punching that I did in the corners, and as you can see, the paper's been coffee dyed, and I always like to think that no two coffee dyed papers look alike because the different patterns and swirls and dots and things that you get from the coffee are always different. Now this I'm going to show you in a little bit here how to make one of these. This is a two-sided envelope made out of scrapbook paper. This is a really simple way to make two pockets. So I'm just showing you what that looks like, and since the inside of it is white, I would either coffee dye this paper ahead of time or do the trick that we showed you in video 1 where you, I'm just showing you now how you can wrap that around a journal page and you've got pockets on either side and you can stick little things in there. But like I said, in the inside we want to make it look vintage, and it's always nice when someone opens up a pocket and there's a surprise in there. So if you were to stamp or to glue down scrapbook paper on the inside, it just gives it a really nice finished look with a neat little surprise. When they open that up, not only will they get whatever's in the pocket, but they'll see some really neat designs in there. This is a little piece, a die cut that I got in a kit at some point and was in my stash. Now you could ink this a little bit to make it look a little bit older. It has a little bit of glitter on it. You could even paint over it if you like with something somewhat translucent, and it could work as a paper clip kind of, or a bookmark. You could put an adhesive underneath it and tuck something underneath like that, so it could work as a tuck spot. You could cut a strip of chipboard or the cereal box to make it into a bookmark. So that would be a really nice little piece to put into the journal. This I'm going to be showing you in a little bit as well. This is a piece that I had of 12 by 12 scrapbook paper that I had previously stamped, and it's got Distress Oxide stamp ink on it. And what's neat about that ink is when you get it wet, it oxidizes. So you'll see different colors come up. Some parts will be lighter than others. It looks almost like a watermark. It's really neat. And I'm just showing you kind of some of the detail. And with flowers and lace and things like that, these types of stamps, you could stamp a whole bunch of these at once and they could work in a number of journals, because the flowers and lace look vintage and they kind of go with almost any theme. So these would work in a Victorian journal, they could work in a Christmas journal. So like I said, I'll be showing you that vellum technique. It's really cool, and I actually learned it on a YouTube video, and so I'm going to be showing you how to create your own translucent papers made out of scrapbook paper that you might already have some type of pattern. And it would work especially well with this piece of paper because the flip side is so dark. It will show through on the light side and you have instant vintage. This was a little manila skinny envelope, so something like this that you might already have at home that would work really well. It's a little bit warped from, you know, having been coffee dyed, and this would work fine plain, or you could stamp on it. You can ink the edges, of course. You could put stickers on it that you could then paint over a little bit to make it look a little bit aged. And then this, I'm just showing you, you know, what I was talking about with the variations that you get with coffee dyed paper. You can see there's splatters and big splotches on it. So it really lends itself to that antique look. There's even kind of this weird little pockmark thing that happened in it. So lots of options. So stay tuned here. We're gonna show you how to do some vellum techniques and some things to do with junk mail and a little bit of embossing. So something that's become really popular in the world of junk journaling and mixed media are these paper napkins. Now I picked these up at Tuesday Morning, and you probably see these in lots of stores. That's where I usually go to get them, is at Tuesday Morning, but anywhere that they would sell birthday supplies or party supplies, anything like that. I've seen these even at grocery stores. So just pick out some prints that you like. And these are really nice. And so with our junk mail, what I wanted to show you is how we could turn this flyer, which has a Michaels ad on it, into a nice little piece that we could put in our journal. So let's see if this looks like a 2-ply. What we would want to do is separate the 2 plies and try to get that there. Peel this away. And you can always save the back for another use. So, as you can probably already tell, when we separate that ply, the back from it, this gives a really nice translucent look, and it'll become even more so once we add gel medium to it. So, the gel medium is what I'm going to use as a sealant for this, and I want to be very careful with it with the napkin because it is delicate. So you could use a brayer. We can use a paintbrush, but we're going to have to be very careful if we use a paintbrush because running it across is going to tear this napkin. So I think what I'm going to do is use a foam brush, because that we could just sort of pat it down. I really want to stick with things that you have at home, that you're more likely to have at home, or that are at least easier to buy. And I realize not everyone has a brayer. So I'm just going to very lightly start to seal this down, and the gel medium will sink in through the napkin since it is porous, and it will start to adhere the napkin onto the flyer, and it'll make a really neat embellishment for the journal. And another sealant that would work really well here is Mod Podge. Which I just don't have any Mod Podge handy, so otherwise I'd be using it. Although I do have something very similar, which is Aleene's Tacky Glue. And this will dry clear as well. This is another one that you might have at home already. Excuse me. And if you're noticing that some of the colors are running a little bit, don't worry, because that will just add to that sort of imperfect aged look that we're going for. I'm going to add some water to that glue. It is quite thick. Okay, so it's definitely starting to seal down. And it looks a mess right now, but it will dry clear and it will dry matte, which is nice. It's not going to be glossy. And that'll make a really nice focal image too. That camellia, I think it's a camellia or a rose. And as you can see, you can still see the flyer in the background, but now it looks antique because it's got that color on top of it. And we could even go a step further when this is dry and add something that will make it look even a little bit more antique. Any type of transparent medium like Mod Podge, if we just add a little bit of brown ink to it, it will tint it so that it will make anything that we paint look a little bit aged, which is really cool. So I'm just going to try to dab up some of this extra glue in some of these areas and get it to these corners. And then once this is dry, and this will take a good amount of time to dry, especially if we just let it sit. I'm going to pop this in front of the fan, which will speed it up some. You can see how cool that is compared to the flyer that it once was. And then I'll show you a neat trick for how we could make a journaling spot on the back of the flyer. Now this is dry, and this edge came up a little bit. I'll just fix that with a little bit of glue. So for the flip side, we're just going to use our trick of cutting some paper that will adhere to the back and use a glue stick. And I want to keep this edge, the rough edge. So I'm going to make sure and measure so that that will stay. You can see how precise I am, haha. Just want to get the approximate dimensions of the paper. Flip that around. And if you start building up your collection of napkins, you'll be able to do this with different designs in different parts of the journal. And these work really nicely for collage too. I heard someone say recently on YouTube that junk journaling is a combination of journaling and mixed media. And I really find that to be true. It seems like a lot of the things, a lot of the tools and paints and all the stuff that I've collected over the years for mixed media can be applied to junk journaling too. And the more I learn about the journals, the more I see how the two cross over. So this is double-sided tape. It says right here, and it's permanent. This one is by Scotch, but I've seen different brands that carry this, and I think I picked these up at Michael's, but I've seen them at Walmart. I think it's a pretty widely available tape. I'm just gonna get it all jumbled up here. Cut that off here. Okay, so now I see, and it is very sticky, which is great. We know it's going to seal down really well. So I'm going to go ahead and tape and try not to get my fingers on the tape too much because it'll start to take away some of the stickiness. I'm just going to do all four sides. And I think this is a nice alternative to the glue stick. And of course you won't have any paper warping with it because it's a dry adhesive. And it is very sticky. So I'm going to be careful where I place my paper because it's going to be pretty well adhered. Now, if it bothers you that you can see through this, I would just pop a thin sheet of scrapbook paper or something with like a floral design or something so that you can see through it, but you know, maybe something like this so that if someone's really looking, they would just see a design. But for the purposes of the video, we'll keep it as it is. And like I mentioned earlier, the Mod Podge will work for the napkin. So I'm just going to get that little edge, and this is the Mod Podge matte. And you might know already that they make lots and lots of different Mod Podges. I like the matte because there's no shine to it, obviously, because it's matte. And I'd love to hear if you have tried the other Mod Podges. The only two that I have tried are the gloss and the matte, but there are several different formulas. There's one called Antique that I would love to try. I think that would probably tint whatever you're gluing. And then there's also one that's made specifically for paper, and I don't know how it's different from this formula, but that would be a neat one to try too. So if you have tried some of the other types of Mod Podge, let me know. Let me know what you think. There's even one that can make dishes dishwasher safe, which is awesome. Lots of DIY uses. So I'm just going to make sure that this napkin is really well adhered on these edges so it doesn't start to peel away. And I don't want to put this in my paper trimmer, just in case it bunches up the napkin. I don't want that. Now, one trick when you're cutting is to flip over whatever your second layer. You want that to be bottom side down so that the napkin is facing down, and you'll usually get a more precise cut than if you were trying to kind of eyeball it here and look through and make sure, especially since even though it is translucent, you can't really see all the way through it very well. So I'm just going to slowly go around here and protect this fragile napkin. And the Mod Podge is going around. And I'm going to dry this again since we added more adhesive. So I was playing around last night with ways that we could make journaling lines and ones that look not perfect, if that makes sense. And I thought of an idea that I had seen about glue stamp, hot glue stamps. And I first started out making this very homemade looking stamp. And I first tried it with ink. Let's see if I can find that sheet. This is just some scrap paper that I had. So the ink is right here, and as you can see, it's very faint. You can't even tell that it's lines. So then I went to paint, and the paint did better. And I think in black or brown, that might work. It's just, the problem is these little blobs, they make just really blobby looking lines. So then I thought about, what if we use the edge of this piece of cardboard? This was just cut out of a box, and that did a little bit better. And there was a learning curve with this too. I'll show you. This was my paint paper right here that I was using kind of as a palette. So I found that the less paint, the better. So let me try this. And you definitely don't want a runny paint either. Something kind of a little bit heavier bodied, but it doesn't have to be anything super expensive, just something kind of creamy. So I'm just going to first paint it up like this, and then you make some test prints off to the side. And the test prints not only kind of help you see what you're going to get, but they'll get some of the paint off too, because too much paint will make blobs. So if you've ever worked with jelly plates, it's the same story where you want less paint. A thinner coating of paint does a lot better as far as, and then you can flip it around so that you have some variation. and you can get maybe 3 stamps or so. It does give you some texture. And what I haven't tried yet on the edge of the cardboard yet is ink. So let me hold off on that for a little bit. I'm just going to let that cardboard dry. Another thing that popped into my head just now is we could glue some corrugated cardboard. So if you tear open a cardboard box, this is what's between, like where you see the zigzagging. I don't know how well you can see that in there, but if I were to peel the front and back off of this, there's corrugated cardboard in there, which is already lined. So that's another idea that I'm going to try today, and we'll see how that goes. So while I have some wet paint here, let me show you what I was thinking about with stenciling. So on some of the coffee dyed papers, you might remember I showed you some stenciled backgrounds, and the only thing with paint is that you won't be able to write over it. So that area that if you were to stencil it with paint, would need to stay just with the design. People won't be able to journal on it. But you get some really cool effects. And if you just wanted to do a small area and give a page, you know, a little bit of extra design, you could do that with paint. Now, if you're going to use any type of foam or like a blending tool, this will need to go in water right away if you have acrylic paint on it. Otherwise it's going to dry and it will ruin your foam. So I'm going to pop this under some water and be right back. Okay, so this little round is still damp, and last night I thought I'd see what happens, because Distress inks and a lot of stamp inks that are on the market are water reactive. I thought I would see what would happen if I took a water reactive stamp ink and put a damp tool on it and flip this over so it doesn't pick up any of that paint. I think if anything, it just made the ink maybe a little bit more faint, but as you can see, you get much more of a watercolor effect. So that's what happens with tea dye distress ink, which I think is a neat effect. But if we were to go, I'll just switch over to this one, which is a brand new one. I'll just show you the difference. This will take quite a bit of inking because, you know what, I'll try a different stamp pad that has more ink. This is a newer stamp pad. Similar color though, this is sepia. So when these are brand new though, these little tools, you have to ink them up pretty well to get a decent amount of ink all the way around the circle. It's just seeming to want to ink mostly in that one area. So let me just give this a whirl though. So this is that flowery stencil, and see here the ink to me looks like stamp ink, or excuse me, the paint looks like ink. Okay, so this one's coming out a little bit more intense than the one I just did. So see how nice that could look as a background. And like I said, the difference would be that this you can journal over with just about anything you would want, even, you know, a colored pencil or something. But definitely pens can go over that, whereas with the paint can jam up a pen. So what I'll do now is I'm going to go off camera for a little bit and work with these two tools and see what I might be able to do. My idea is that if I leave one side of the cardboard for paint, and I'll just mark it so that I know which is which, and I need to straighten this one up. I need to cut that a little bit straighter, otherwise I'm not going to get a full impression. But what we could try is making those lines with some ink. So let me just see what happens on the regular old cardboard, because what I'm thinking is that I might want to put some type of medium on here to seal the cardboard. That might make for better impressions. That does okay actually with kind of a dotted line, but like I said, that one end is kind of pushed in too much to get a full impression right there. But a lot of times if you get stencils that are made out of paper, which sometimes you'll get those like die cut stencils that are made out of like a heavy cardstock or chipboard or something like that, what they usually recommend to make them last longer is to put gel medium over them, and that will toughen them up and make them more waterproof. So that's what I'm thinking we should do with this. Is I'll get another piece of cardboard, glue this down. I think this side might actually work better as the stamp because this one has more pronounced ridges. Put some gel medium over it, which if you're not familiar, gel medium is an acrylic medium. It's clear. It goes on kind of a milky white color, but it will dry clear. It does take a little time to dry. I'll put it in front of the fan. And I think once we have done that, we'll be able to ink it up or paint it up and make some nice impressions, and it'll even get some of these little furry things in there, which I think will just add to that distressed look. And it should hold for quite a few uses with the gel medium on it. So that's what I'm going to do. Let's try that out. Okay, so I wanted to show you this cool technique. If you add the Mod Podge with a little bit of sepia or brown ink, and I'm going to be pretty light-handed with this. This is acrylic ink. There's 3 little dropperfuls. I'm just going to use the end of this little water brush. A medium like Mod Podge that's going to dry clear, and then add either India ink or this acrylic ink, and then I'm going to take my little foam tool and I'll just show you what you can do here. So especially in those little areas that still look and then just around the edges, I don't want to do so much that I cover up that really nice green, mint green, as if we don't wash it out right away. So I just thought I would show you. I did try out the corrugated cardboard and it was a no-go, so I'm just gonna go ahead and use the end of my cardboard strip here to make my journaling lines. And I'm using this archival ink in the sepia, and I'm gonna go ahead and stamp these rows. There are actually a lot of companies that sell stencils and stamps that make journal lines. They're specifically for journals, and some of them have kind of a mixed media grunge look, so those would work really well in a vintage looking project. So I'm going to look into those, but in the meantime, this is an option for things that you already have on hand. Because after all, the junk journal, you know, one of the things that we're trying to do is use up things that we already have rather than having to buy, you know, so many different tools and ephemera and all these sort of ready-made things, which are helpful because they can help you put together layouts really fast, but whenever you can, it's nice to be able to say I genuinely handmade this. So there's my kind of scribbly lines. Not too bad. I think this would look nice with maybe some type of little embellishment or flower down here, but otherwise not bad. This is the flip side of the napkin that we did. So Michael's flyer, not too bad. The last part of this tutorial, I told you about that vellum technique, the faux vellum with baby oil. I had talked about the faux vellum technique, and here is that dark piece of scrapbook paper with the roses on the back side, and we want this side to get the effect. And I'm just using plain baby oil. Which is now getting all over the desk. Oh boy, this is turning into a mess over here. Okay. I'm gonna slap that on there. It already got the oil on it. So we're gonna improvise. Work a little better. So here we go. I'm gonna get my paintbrush really saturated with the baby oil. And normally you would want to stamp after you do this, because as you can see, it's making this ink come up a little bit. So as you can see, I am really slathering it on. And then I'll be sure to seal this part after we're finished here. For now, I want to show you the technique. Now just trying to get little areas that I missed. And we're gonna let this dry. The oil will soak into the paper, but it does take some drying time.